Today I want to start out with an introduction to this lesson and kind of go over some of the stuff from the opener. So we're going to be talking about statistics today. And what is statistics? Well, it's the practice of collecting and analyzing numerical data in large quantities for the purpose of inferring proportions in a whole from those in a representative sample. All those fancy words mean is that I'm going to gather some data and we're going to figure out what it means. Now, you've been coming in contact with a lot of statistics lately, maybe in the news, maybe over the weather, any sports analysis involves statistics, the predictions of the election, anytime they gather data for the polls, that's using statistics, and even grades, looking at analyzing grades or coming up with a curve to change your test grade a little bit, all of that is statistics. So you may be familiar with these terms, mean, median, and mode. Mean is kind of the same thing as the average. Median is your middle value. So if you put all of your values in order from least to greatest, median is the one that falls in the middle. And then mode is whatever value occurs the most. So this should be kind of a review from what you did from the last lesson. And all that's going to come into play today whenever we look at analyzing different graphs and charts and tables. Now, this was one of the graphs that you were asked to kind of interpret from the opener. I asked you, what can you infer from this graph and what do you think this data represents? Well, this data actually represents how valuable each pick is in the NFL draft. So what this is telling us is that the first pick, so over here, pick 1, they are valued much higher than over here the 256th pick. So their contract is going to be greater. They're going to be paid more. So a few reasons that might be important. It's obviously important to the player because they're paid more, but it's also important to the team. How valuable of a player are they receiving based on what pick they get? Something else that you were asked to analyze in the opener was this graph. So this graph actually represents the daily cases of the coronavirus excluding mainland China. So everything outside of China, this is how the cases grew. So this data is important to us because it helps our government leaders decide about the shelter-in-place orders. How long do we need to be quarantined? When is it safe to allow businesses to reopen? It also shows us the effect on the economy. So as the numbers of the coronavirus increases, we can see how our economy has taken a pretty big hit, especially among small businesses. A lot of people have had to lay workers off or file for unemployment. It also affects the distribution of medical supplies. Once the numbers hit a certain level, the government is able to declare a state of emergency and use federal funds to provide support to the medical staff and make sure that they have plenty of supplies. And then, of course, it also affects travel advisories, like are you allowed to go from one state to the next? Are you allowed to leave the country? How many cases are in a particular country determine whether people can travel to or from that place. So all of this data we can gather just from looking at this particular graph. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be analyzing different representations of data. So we have what's called a histogram, which looks very similar to the one with the coronavirus cases. We're also going to be looking at what's called a box plot. You may have seen this before, you may not have. Some people call it a box and whisker plot because we have a box here in the center and then it kind of looks like we have whiskers coming off the sides of it. Those are going to be our main focus for today, but we also have what's called a dot plot, which kind of shows the frequency of something occurring. So let's say that you have different heights. Well, if you have a height of 10, that has a much higher frequency than if you have a height of 17. And then we have what's called a frequency table or a two-way table. And we're going to be looking at that a little bit more next class.